Are you ready for an open discussion with the best of the best and the best of what's next? Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show. Join in on a great conversation today with some of the world's great influencers as they showcase great advice and techniques that made them the game changers they are today. Now, here's Tony DUrso.
Welcome, I'm your host, Tony DUrso, and once again, I'm pleased to have you join us. At the time of this recording, we have over 15 million listens throughout my podcasting career, and now with you, we have one more. I owe a lot to you for faithfully listening every week and sharing with your friends. I want to thank you and say, yeah, we really do make a good team. And of course, this is all designed to help you and your friends turn your vision into reality. And today, we're chatting with someone at the top of their category, an elite entrepreneur. We're going to discuss higher purpose connection with Scott Mason. Now, I know you're a business person and you're probably wondering, what's this got to do with me? How can it help my business grow up to the next level? Well, check this out. Scott Mason is an inspirational and keynote speaker who focuses on resolving human disconnection and building resilience by connecting to a higher purpose world to build a better self and a better world. I love that. From printing to general counsel and vice president of operations for Urban Resource Institute. This is the USA's largest operator of domestic violence shelters, to second in command of New York's administrative tribunal system, to podcasting, and the list goes on. ... And by the way, if you're hearing this on Apple Podcasts, would you please rate my show? I like Apple. And if you don't have Apple, that's fine too. The Tony DUrso Show is everywhere, such as Roku, Alexa, YouTube, Rumble, Stitcher, Spotify. And you can go to also tonydurso.com/review, and you can drop a kind one there. All right, enough of all that preamble. Let's get into it. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show.
Tony, it is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
The honor is mine. This is a tongue twister. Okay, let's see if you guys can say this 5 times really fast. We're all looking forward to learning more about a higher purpose connection. Maybe it's my Italian, but anyways. And I want to really know how this helps us grow our business. So, and just before we get into that, let's get your backstory and tell us, how did it all start for you, Scott?
Interesting story. So I was actually born in England. I was the son of a British woman who was studying language in grad school there, and a man who was from Trinidad who had gone to law school in England. And they had an affair, and out came me. I was adopted by a couple of African Americans who moved me and themselves to Kansas, where I grew up. This biracial LGBT boy in the middle of conservative Nowheresville, Midwest. I remember I would go and run in the wheat fields 45 minutes a day. And then I would look up at the stars and I would dream that there had to be something more for me out there. There just had to be. And eventually I ended up in New York City for law school. And after that, really became involved and excited about public policy, making change in the world's Alpha City, New York. And that's how I started my career as an attorney and an executive with the city of New York itself.
That is quite something. Now we're going to drill more into that and find out a little bit more, because you're very varied, if that's the right way. Is that the right way to say it? You're very varied. You're a varied person, and almost, it depends how you sound it. If an Italian says it, then it makes you laugh. You're varied, but you've done a lot of things, as I mentioned in your bio, and I'm really interested. And probably your current, let's call it, your focus is speaker, podcaster. I want to get into the vision that you saw for your life. And before it happened, like somewhere along the line, you go, I want to be a speaker. I want a podcast. I want to share my knowledge with the world. Can you tell us about that vision?
Absolutely. I always knew that I had certain gifts. The gifts were generally related to oratory and building community through the ability to bring out passion, to unite people and excite them behind a common theme that I might have been working on at some point or another. But it never really occurred to me until far later in my life than I frankly would have liked, that actually might create a space for me to connect to something deeper. Earlier in my career, I had an intellectual interest in public policy that I mentioned a little while ago that ultimately led to my career as an attorney and then later a management and executive official with the city of New York. Ultimately, that same intellectual interest in organization, in growing and transforming organizations, having a social impact led to the work in the nonprofit and then an entrepreneurial streak in a space that I saw as allowing additional growth and transformation led to the printing business. At the same time, one thing that I never thought of before this leg of my journey was how these intellectual interests, or if so at all, with regards to these intellectual interests, there was a connection between why I was here on this planet, the gifts that I had been given, and the ultimate meaning behind what I was doing. Once I began to put those pieces together, meld the head with the heart, everything in my life began to change. And that's how this leg of my journey began. And it is, no question, the best ever.
I love it. I love it. You're very passionate and very enthused. You're exuberant. There you go. That's your label today. You're Mr. Exuberant.
I love it.
And you mentioned this a little bit, but I like to always dive into why do you do this? What's the overriding purpose behind this?
Yeah. For a long time, I actually did not place any emphasis on professional success and connection to purpose, or honestly, meaning. I merely saw my professional journey as a means to an end. And that end usually was simply either more money or more stature, power, and authority in the world. And so I actually had a climb during my time within the government of New York City that was very successful without having really any political patrons, which is rare because I saw my only goal as achieving, without really, almost mindlessly, the next rung higher, the next rung higher, the next rung higher, the next rung higher. There was a fundamental problem with that. I'll never forget, one day, I had a very early meeting. It was like at 7 a.m. And after that meeting was over, I was hungry and decided to go get some breakfast. And I left the office that I was in. I was crossing the street to get to a deli. And as I was crossing the street, I noticed that there was one of those corner coffee vendors in a little metal box on wheels. And I saw him selling coffee to people on the street for 75 cents. And those people would give him their 3/4 or their dollar bill, and he'd give them change. When he gave them coffee, he had this incredible smile on his face. And Tony, when I looked at that man, I couldn't feel anything but anger and envy. Anger because it wasn't me. Envy because he had that smile on his face every day. Part of why I ultimately changed career trajectories and became so committed to really focusing on understanding what meaning is, tying that to our skills and experience, and then ultimately wrapping that in with a sense of purpose to connect people to what their ultimate role in this life is, was because I didn't want to, after many years of thinking about that day, live the rest of my life angry and jealous like that. I wanted something more. And I've reaped the rewards of making that change. I want that for other people, Tony. Every single person deserves it, and no one deserves to feel what I felt when I was looking at the man in the coffee cart.
Scott, not to be disrespectful, but if I would have looked at that man, I would have said, "Hey, I want to do that too. What a great business." Selling coffee, this is like I'm talking way back then, a couple of decades before it's on every corner. Because I remember back in the days of Chicago, I grew up on coffee starting at 5 years old. I really, really did. My mom would not every day, but if we just happen to be, out of cereal for all the kids, my mom raised 6 boys, so she had her hands full. So what she was really good at improvising. She would make coffee with a lot of cream and a lot of sugar in the big pot that you make spaghetti. Well, this morning at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, she's making coffee. And so she pours it into the cereal bowls when it's all cooked. And there's the bread we call it ganella bread. It's not ganella bread. It's just a big giant loaf of bread. It's not cut. And you just rip off a clump and you dip it in your coffee and you eat it. And that was my breakfast. Many, many more mornings than I want to admit because I really liked it. And I enjoyed that better than cereal or anything. So I would always ask for, the Sicilian breakfast, as I call it. So I'm weaned from 5 years old on coffee. And so to me, in Chicago, way, way back before it's on every corner, I would walk block after block after block after block trying to find a good cup of coffee. So when I see a coffee uh, vendor on the streets, it's like, I want to do this and bring coffee to people. So I understand that person's point of view, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody at all. But it changed you from a very successful career in the corporate world in a very influential point's not the right word, influential post position in New York City, and it made you wanna change, and so I wanna dig a little bit deeper. Why? Why perhaps you could fill that in. Why did this change you so much? You may have answered it, but it's like, that is quite an epiphany.
Yeah. When I mentioned earlier that I would go running in the backwoods of Kansas and I would look up at the stars and dream of something better for myself, it wasn't thinking about it purely so I could have social stature or so I could have money. It was because I wanted a life for myself that was happy. My mother worked in a dog food factory, Tony. My dad worked as a civil servant with the State Highway Patrol. These are honorable jobs, and they did a fantastic job of providing for me. That being said, expectations were not high for someone like me. And I will share a story with you that I don't always share with people, but it goes as to some of the things that motivated me a little bit more and ultimately got me thinking on a track that was purely about social stature. As I mentioned, my adoptive parents are African American. I am biracial. And this was a conservative, overwhelmingly white milieu that I was raised in. I'll never forget my debate and speech teacher telling my class about me. You can teach a monkey how to speak, but you can't teach him how to think. Imagine the impact of a half-black child hearing that crack about his intellect and being a monkey in front of the entire class, and the message that sort of statement would make, the impact that could have on someone's consciousness. And so I developed a drive that was by and large around the desire to succeed, to prove that there was something more to me, that I was capable, that I could have an impression, that I wasn't just a monkey that could talk, but I was a monkey that could think. I wasn't a monkey at all, actually, but that I was someone that could think and really have a positive impact in the world. Again, ultimately, though, if I am choosing to base my achievements, the metrics for my success, upon the opinions of others that I didn't even know. Even that teacher, he probably forgot about what he said 2 seconds later. What does that mean for my inside? That coffee vendor, you're right, Tony. He was smart. He had a business based on the smiling that I saw him give to his customers every single day that was good. It was perfect for him. But to walk around every day like I did, feeling I was achieving things. I had a great office. I had power and authority. I would walk into the room. People would do what I said. People paid attention. But to feel nothing inside, no concern, no attachment, no feeling about anything, I felt less than human. And ultimately, somewhere inside, there was a being who wanted to feel human. That is why ultimately I felt I had to change. I owed it to myself, Tony, to be a human.
I'm speechless. That is an amazing answer. I want to thank you so much for sharing that. Now we understand some of this passion, this exuberance, the root of Scott Mason and why you're so successful. I want to thank you so much. And I want to let my listener know that you can find Scott at speakerscott.com, and Scott is with 2 T's, SCOTT, speakerscott.com. And I challenge you to go check it out and listen to him speak. You're listening to him speak now. Passionate, enthused. He really gets the point across, and it's really great. And that's why I brought him on the show, because I want to inspire, motivate, enthuse, and get you all to maybe learn something more about your business and how you can take it up a few notches. Let's learn more about Scott. Scott, let's get into your vision path. And one of the things you've mentioned a few things to me. I want to take up some of these. Is a bicycle in the sun gave you the strength to make it through your darkest hour? Could you please share that?
Yes. Tony, when I share what I'm about to share with you, it's very difficult for me not to become emotional. So I'm warning you right now that this story is so personal and cuts so deep that you may get some real heart vibes coming out here. As I mentioned earlier, I climbed and climbed and climbed up the ladder of New York City's government. And the last job I had there was as second in command of the city's tribunal system. It was a great job. I reported directly to the agency head. And after I'd been there for a while, I'll never forget something that happened very abruptly. I had actually just received a merit raise that I hadn't even asked for, but I loved getting it. My boss called me into her office one morning. She said, "Come and talk to me about something." So I went. And we talked about this, that, and the other, and we were going back and forth about some things. And she said something among the things that she was raising in this discussion that got my ears perked. She said, "Scott, sometimes I feel like you are so involved and engaged in the agency that you're trying to keep me at a distance, at arm's length," actually was the word she used, "within my own agency. And I don't like that." Tony, I'd been in large organizational life long enough to know that when those words were uttered, a nearly 20-year career had ended. And in fact, within 60 days, we had entered into a mutual agreement within which I left. It was the tail end of the Great Recession, and unemployment was still very, very high. I would read the online newspapers or magazines every day, and there was a genre that emerged. You may remember it, or hopefully you don't. called unemployment porn. And what it was were graphic stories, usually involving male middle-aged executives like me, who were recently unemployed with no particular prospects and possibly entering the ranks of the permanently unemployed. That made me nervous. So I went to a career counselor. He looked at my resume. He talked to me, Scott, you are freaking out over nothing. You are going to have a job in 3 months. Don't worry for a second. But Tony, I tell you, and I tell everyone who might be watching this or listening, that did not happen. Didn't happen. Hundreds of resumes went out. Went on a few interviews, never heard from anyone again. Nothing seemed to work. Eventually, a year passed. No prospects on the horizon. No hope. My bank account was looking very precarious. There I was, an early 40-something Columbia law graduate with a successful executive history with no future prospects. And once that year passed, the pressure of what I was going through and the vision of the future that I was beginning to see broke me. I will never, ever forget one morning around 3 a.m, I woke up. And although this is painful to admit, I have come to believe it's important to be honest. As I was sitting and thinking about my future or lack thereof, I just started to cry. And I started to cry. And I started to cry. I couldn't stop. The ruckus woke up my husband. He comforted me. He listened. He supported. And eventually, after about an hour and a half of this, we both, out of just sheer exhaustion, fell asleep. Now, fortunately, he did not have to work the next day. Neither did I. And so he said, Scott, why don't we go on a bike ride? Okay, sure. I said, why not? Nothing better to do. So I live in a walk-up apartment, Tony, here in New York City. And we each got our bikes and we put them on our shoulders and we tromped down the stairs. And then we entered into the sidewalk and we crossed the sidewalk and then we hit the street. And we took the bicycles off of our shoulders. And when I took my bicycle off my shoulder, the tires hit the street. And in that moment, my husband said to me, Scott, take a look around. And I did. The sky, Tony, it was just a crystal blue. Leaves. They were an unbelievably rich green. And the yellow of my bicycle, it glistened like gold in the sun. Take a look around, my husband said, because this moment will pass. You will work again. And you'll look back and you'll think about this moment and you'll wish you could have it again. That it'll be gone. And Tony, that recognition of beauty, that one moment of seeing that bicycle in the sun, it helped me make it through that day. I don't know if I could have otherwise. And the day after that, and the day after that too.
Thank you for sharing that, Scott. I'm familiar with that in a way where someone hits their darkest hour and something strong helps change that and gives them the strength and the courage to carry on. And I know someone who was in a similar boat in terms of no job, no life, no house, no nothing, and took that darkest hour to write their vision and what they saw themselves do in the future, and that actually helped get them through to actually accomplish that. So it's very, very strong, and it's times like these, not that we wished for them, not that we want them, not that we ever wanna have it happen again, but we look at times like this and go, "That was such a good time to help r bring me back up." You know what I mean? Very, very important. And I wanna tie that into this episode, which is all about higher purpose connection. And you're there, you realize that there's a beautiful world out here, which is beautiful no matter how you feel, whether you're happy or you're sad. It's a beautiful world if you look at it one way, and of course, someone could look at it and say it's not beautiful, but you were looking at a great world at that time. And how how did that change your life into the success that you are now? How did that springboard you to what you do now? Is in terms of the higher purpose connection?
First and foremost, it taught me that I actually had the ability to do exactly what you just mentioned: shift my view of the world, reframe what I perceive. The other thing that it taught me was that with the ability to change how we perceive, we have an even greater ability, which is to change our future. If and only if we choose to walk that path. One thing that experience at the end of my time with the city of New York taught me was that even in what would seem to be the most secure environment in the world, government work, security was a lie. It wasn't there. Entrepreneurship was something that I had never thought of. But thinking again about the man selling the coffee, he was an entrepreneur. He smiled because he loved what he was doing, but it was also his that he was doing. I had walked among entrepreneurs, shopped at their stores, read about them online, used their apps, done whatever I might have done with entrepreneurs every single day, but I had never seen them. I'd never seen them. I'd never understood or even contemplated what it could be like to be expressing yourself through your own vision in this world, not necessarily the vision of others. I later went as a transitory matter into that nonprofit job for a few years to regain my financial stature and then to think about how I could move on after that. Even doing great work like domestic violence shelter operations, it's still someone else's vision. It wasn't mine. The journey to finding who and what Scott Mason is, and I believe each of us have within us, was another step after that. And so that's how all of that ultimately tied together for me.
Makes perfect sense, and I really appreciate you putting that all together. This is strong. So many people, I don't even have to mention it, have been affected by the events of 2020, that this information can really be used. This interview has so much great points because we talk about being at the bottom of the bottom and bouncing all the way up to the top in our category, which is absolutely amazing. And it can be done for each and every single person. You had that vision and you made it happen, which is extraordinary. And I want to learn the next part. So we have the vision. Now, there's another story that you mentioned to me before that helps achieve a goal, which is an 80-year-old utility worker that helped you achieve your goal. Tell us that story.
Yes. Sometimes when we have a vision or a mission, it can seem that the obstacles in front of us, like the events of the past year and a half, and many that are to come that I'm sure will be as bad, if not worse, not to be negative, but the world is full of unpredictable events that are not good. Recessions, pandemics, terrorists, all these sorts of things. It may seem as though the possibilities that we can enact to have those missions come true are insurmountable. And I hope this story convinces anyone that listens that that isn't true. Once upon a time, there was a man that was born and raised in the backwoods of rural Pennsylvania. He worked his entire life for the utility system there, and he had 5 sons. 4 of them, just like that gentleman, grew up and stayed in Pennsylvania their entire lives. But the 5th wanted something different for his life, and he moved to New York City, just like me. And in fact, that 5th son is my husband. And that utility worker is my father-in-law. When my father-in-law approached his 80th birthday, Tony, he began to not feel very well. And after some months, it became apparent that he probably would never feel well again. As the year approached, he saw the holidays coming, and he reached out to each of his 5 sons and asked if they would find time, no matter what, to be with him during the holidays. Now, the 4 that lived in Pennsylvania and were easily accessible to him said, absolutely, yes, we will be there. And they found the time to be with him. And from all I've heard, it was a wonderful experience for all involved. But the 5th, my husband, worked in a job that did not allow him to take time off for the holidays. And so when his father called him, he got on the phone. He said, Dad, I can't make it during the holidays, but the moment the new year comes and I can get a day off, I promise I will see you. And true to his word, Tony, when the new year came, the second my husband could get a day off, he was on Amtrak and zipping back to Pennsylvania as fast as he could. The first day they spent together, it was beautiful. They woke up and my husband helped clip his dad's nails. Then they had some breakfast together. He took his dad to get his hair cut. And there was a new lady that had just started at the barbershop that day, and my sick 80-year-old father-in-law flirted with her, and she flirted with him, and they giggled and laughed, and they had a grand old time. Then my husband drove his dad and himself back home. And when they arrived at the house, they stepped out of the car, and they walked to the door, and they opened it. And then they crossed the threshold between the outside and the inside. And in that moment, my father-in-law turned around and he looked at my husband in the eyes and collapsed into his arms. My father-in-law never woke up again. But he had proved something. This was an 80-year-old man who was sick, so sick he couldn't even cut his own nails, who had a vision for how he wanted his life to end. And that vision was to see his 5 sons. And his commitment to that vision gave him the power over life and death. If a sickly 80-year-old man and the commitment to his vision can wield that sort of power. Imagine what all of us entrepreneurs, people with visions of our own, can achieve against obstacles far less severe than death when we're facing them. It's inspiring, and it's something I ask everyone to remember. I do myself. When I say, I just can't do it, an 80-year-old man could.
Scott, I've never heard a story like that in my life. What you've just said there, and I'm kind of choked up and I'm kind of not even knowing how to answer or comment. And I know that's incorrect grammatically, but I'm kind of almost shaken by this. It's wow, what a message that his will to live was so strong that it was senior to anything else until he accomplished the vision that he wanted. Wow, and you're so right. That is such a what word can I s a huge vision, accomplishment. That's not even the right word. I'm a little disoriented because it's so powerful and it's so sad. I mean, I lost my dad, uh, some years back, and you're telling the story reminds me of my dad, and so I'm kind of a little awkward on this, but the fact that he could hold death at bay, that's the whole thing, and here we are, entrepreneurs wanting to accomplish something, write a book, make a class, do a speech, do a this, do a whatever. It makes it seem so small compared to something so valiant. I hope I'm saying that right. That is powerful. That's the higher purpose connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow, I don't know what else to say. That is, like, so strong. You've got me speechless. And I don't mean to laugh about it, just
No,
you know what I mean. What do I say?
I'm going to put a check on my box today. That's my achievement of the week.
Well, I guess I can force myself to and hold everything at bay as well and tie this in because the motivation, the whether it is stronger than anything. And that's really what the point is that
Yes.
you made a comment before something like this could be existential. It could be more imperative. When you do that, when it's that important to you, you can accomplish anything.
Absolutely. And regarding the existentialism, one of the things that goes into something else that we discussed during the pre-interview that I really feel the story indirectly points to, but also goes as to connection to purpose and our roles as entrepreneurs. Because Tony, I'm a radical about this, a radical and unashamedly radical. We each were given gifts, skills that are unique to who we are. We also have each been given experiences. We tie those together. Think about how that can connect to service in the world, which as entrepreneurs, we should be, whether it's via providing a product or a direct service, doing something of value for others in the world. Otherwise, people aren't likely to buy it. We, with these skills and experiences and the ultimate service that we're providing, have our purpose. Now, if we have been given skills and experiences, we have been given, every single human being, by providence or God or the universe or whatever you call it, bars of gold on a silver platter that is unique to us. If we say, with the skills and the experience and the talents I have, I choose to not use them for anything. I choose to not connect them to anything of meaning or value. We're literally telling Providence that the bars of gold on the silver platter, we don't need. I believe that that is an existential, ethical wrong. To throw away things that are as precious in this one life that we have as our experience and our gifts. That's where I get radical. If we're entrepreneurs in particular, we have an ethical, a moral imperative to find that vision and to see it through, just like the 80-year-old man.
I'm speechless here. That is like so amazing. And it reminds me of, you're going to believe this? I had a dream a couple years back where I'm speaking with a higher level being. And I don't even know why, but I'm giving this being bars of gold nonstop. It was just like endless. And it was like, if anyone can interpret that for me, please let me know. But I'm just giving this being bars of gold, one after the other. And when you mention that bars of gold on the silver platter, I'm going, have you had a dream like that? But the cool part, Scott, it was endless. I had an unlimited supply of bars of gold.
Yes. And I love that. Maybe you're a secret radical just like me. I will say that, which is what is symbolic about that to me and powerful, which is that the value of the bars of gold that is embedded within our skills and experience, I also believe is unlimited.
Yeah. And I would gladly pay that to speak with any higher level being.
I want to meet
But of
that
course,
being, by
they
the way.
don't need bars of gold. They'll give it right back. Here, you keep it.
Right.
Buy some food. Let's kind of connect some of this. We've talked so many great points. I mean, good and, should I say, bad or sad or sorrowful. So many points. Now, you're a great speaker as well. You're very successful You're a very successful entrepreneur at the top of your category. Let's kind of tie this all together in your purpose, your higher level. Let's just put it all together, and how that, if someone can find that for themselves, how it can propel them to be successful in whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm. I would argue, first of all, what I mentioned briefly a second ago, that making sure that whatever it is that we as entrepreneurs are doing truly is in the spirit of service. The spirit of service, as I'm sure you've heard before on this show, but it can never be repeated enough, is one that ultimately connects us to what is greater than us. And if we are connected to what's greater than us, then we will have resilience. It is a cliche. Actually, talking about resilience and service to something greater, I want to make a point. There is a reason that those in the military say that they are in the service. Think about it. They are there willing to sacrifice something that's greater than almost any of us in the entrepreneurial space are willing to sacrifice. Usually what we are willing to sacrifice might be our dignity or money. But in the military, they're potentially sacrificing their lives for something greater, which are the foreign policy or strategic objectives or the military objectives of the United States. Service, therefore, binds people to such an extent that it not only defines who and what they are professionally, but it makes them willingly be able and happy and proud to march potentially to their deaths. So service and that connection to something greater, which I believe ideally will be connected to your customer or some larger public good, will give us the ability to drive to anything. Ultimately, if we understand our service, are able to tie the bars of gold, the skills and experience that we have, and connect forward, along with the resilience that we need when we think about the 80-year-old man that was able to persevere despite extreme obstacles. We wake up with a different sort of focus. I urge that those who are on the entrepreneurial journey, particularly if you understand that you really are tied into a vision that relates to a higher purpose, to think about every action that you engage in as vision critical vision neutral or trash? And if it's trash, throw it out. Our vision, our connection to that higher purpose demands that we march forward with it. That clarity, that focus will help us get where we need to be.
Beautiful summary, recap, and put it all together. Once again, we talked about higher purpose connection with Scott Mason, and you can find him at speakerscott.com. Scott, what can I say? Thank you so much for sharing with us today. We took everything on a whole nother level of that determination can be so strong that nothing can stop it. That's the whole thing of this interview. Nothing can stop it. When you've got that mindset and it's that strong, it doesn't matter. Come anything, come high water, come the end of the world. It doesn't matter. It's what you want to get done. It is senior to everything. And that's the takeaway on this. Thank you so much, Scott.
Actually, thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with me while I featured an elite entrepreneur who took his vision to reality. This interview was strong, powerful, inspirational, motivational. What a great chat. We talked about higher purpose connection with Scott Mason. What a great speaker. He knows how to get a message across with significant impact. We talked about Scott's roots and how he got started and climbed up the corporate ladder to nearly the top in the city, only to come crashing down at one point and then at the crossroads. A crossroads many of us come to sometimes. Give up or rebuild. His determination kept him going. He didn't succumb to bad news. Yeah, it affected him, but he just didn't end it all there. That's my point. He regrouped. He took a bicycle ride and he refortified and made it happen. Here we talked about what a roadside coffee vendor taught him about the price of disconnection to a much greater meaning. We talked about what an 80-year-old utility worker teaches us about our mission and the ability to achieve a goal. I'll comment on that a little bit more in just a moment. We talked about why entrepreneurial motivation is more than a personal or business issue. It's an existential, as he mentions it, as he says, moral imperative. We talked about what's the connection between inner connection to purpose and great oratory. And behind this all, to recap it, the desire to accomplish something, the vision, the goal. You can make it that song so strong, it can hold back death. Need I say any more? Please remember supporting the show with a nice review or comments on the video platforms. And of course, you can go to DUrso.com/review. And if you use Apple or have any Apple device, a kind review on Apple Podcasts makes my day. I am so appreciative. And of course, please share this with a few friends because you want to help them too, right? I know I've asked you that earlier. All right, use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks, and remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds, and join me on the next episode of The Tony DUrso Show.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of The Tony DUrso Show with his key influencers. Be sure to tune in again next Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Influencers channel.